We've all been waiting for Piers Morgan and Andrew Tate discussing free speech. Round 2. Fight.
His videos have been viewed billions of times online, but he's been banned from pretty much every mainstream social media platform, including Twitter. Andrew Tate, welcome back to Piers Morgan Uncensored. Your take on this, I think, is quite interesting because you've been a victim of being, if victim's the right word, but you've been removed from social media platforms for your opinions. Elon Musk has dedicated himself, he says, to restoring free speech. Do you think that's going to include you, for example?
I don't think it matters if it includes me or not. I think what's important is that free speech is the #1 weapon against absolute tyranny. And although you cannot have complete free speech because then conversations completely break down into asinine insult fests, I do like the idea of the changing of the guard when it comes to control over information.
Is it possible, Andrew Tate, to actually police something like Twitter, to be a platform for genuine free speech? Or is it so toxic and tribal now that whatever happens, you know, before we had all the people on the right screaming away that they were being no-platformed and so on. Now you've got all the people on the left screaming that they're being diminished in some way. It's very tribal, very toxic. Can Musk cut through that? And if so, how?
Yeah, it's going to be extremely difficult. There's always going to be one group of people who are extremely unhappy, but I think that anybody who's...
There's one side of the aisle that wants a free-for-all, and then there's one side of the aisle that wants to police speech. And Elon Musk wants freedom of speech. So therefore, the left will always be mad. You're not going to appease them. They're just going to have to grow up and stop being children and come around. That's the hope. That's what everyone is hoping. We're hoping this is just a freaking fad that slowly dies like the Furbies and Pogs. They slowly dwindles in the wind, and we laugh. We look back at our life and remember a time where we went around and policed speech as if we were China and not America, who encourages freedom of speech because it's important to have a difference of opinion. And even if it's offensive, you can just walk away.
Perspicacious enough to understand the truth of what's been going on in the world recently will know that the left and their narratives have certainly been protected for a very long time.
Have you seen Windy City Heat? No. Okay, maybe I will play that.
And the universe has swings and balances, and God often restores balance to the universe, and perhaps it might swing the other way for a while. I truthfully am a person who believes that all points of view are extremely important, because as soon as you block points of view, you have absolute tyranny.
And in a way, it's sort of self-defeating, isn't it? Because you carried on getting huge attention. It was interesting to me that when you came on the show, for example, we've had, I think, nearly 6 million people have viewed the whole interview that we did.
I just sent him a picture of me. He's like, wow, that's freaking gorgeous.
Which is a huge number of people, certainly far higher than watched it on conventional television. So you have a whole world out there online which operates away from social media platforms.
Yeah, I've been very, very successful in spite of them, but not many people can do that. I'm in a pretty unique position. But I think that everybody needs a voice to a degree, and social media platforms are now the most important platforms on the planet. They control information, and they influence real-world decisions, and they influence people's perception of reality. The last few years of COVID have been a perfect example of what happens when you censor one side of the argument and you only allow one point of view to be purported by the matrix in and of itself, and that's how you end up in tyrannical situations. I think you were just discussing that, Piers.
Yeah, and I think that's a perfectly valid point. You know, people have quite rightly, held me to task over some of the positions I took during the COVID pandemic, notably when the scientists said as a definitive fact that you couldn't transmit the virus if you had the vaccine. It turned out that wasn't true. And I based my observations on that supposed fact and said, right, well, in that case, if you refuse to be vaccinated, you shouldn't get the same rights as people who've been vaccinated, if it's true that if you're unjabbed, you can pass it on. It turned out, actually, there's not much difference whether you've been vaccinated or not. And at that point,
Why is your forehead spray tan, but not the rest of you, Tate? That's a good question. I don't know. It is a little darker on the top. You know, that's where the sun sees it the most.
I changed my mind. But I felt that there were a lot of people who
I thought this would be spicier, by the way.
From Twitter at the time for questioning the validity of scientific statements, and they would then be a complete U-turn. So I do think it was a very interesting period, actually, for testing what free speech means.
It was actually worse than that. You're right, Piers, but it was actually worse than interesting, because what happens is when you censor an entire side of the argument and only allowed one side of the argument to have a voice, you are changing reality in real time. You are shaping the world. The only reason that scam continued as long as it did, and the only reason people didn't get...
That's why when you hear words like election denier, climate denier, science denier, these things, it's just they're just shutting down the speech. They're not actually looking out for your best. And that's the problem with censoring. But yeah, continue. They're shutting it down.
Get to see their own parents get buried. And the only reason people sat and missed cancer appointments because they were scared of the common cold was because they were censoring anybody who said anything contrary to the purported version of events that the mainstream media decided they want the entire world to swallow. It's beyond simply interesting, and it's beyond simply funny or coincidental.
Yeah, I will challenge you on one thing. It's not the common cold, right? COVID-19 has killed 6.6 million people. It is one of the most deadly viruses, certainly of our lifetime. So it wasn't the common cold, but I...
Right. Okay. No one seriously is saying that. I don't take those people seriously, but it's not... You can even see he's about to start smiling. Okay.
I do think it is completely justified for people to say we should be more...
I had COVID, and it's definitely not like the common cold. That's a stupid statement. It didn't kill me, but it sucked.
Cautious, I think.
What's Tate's shirt color? I don't know.
About accepting, during fast-moving pandemics,
beige,
the word of scientists
brown,
as being sacrosanct, because on a number of things, from the use of masks to the efficacy of vaccines in preventing...
No one ever talks to Gavin McInnes after being canceled. This guy sucks compared to the guy. No one talks to... I'm surprised Tim Pool had Milo Yiannopoulos on his show after being canceled. Milo was the OG of cancelization, whether you hate him or love him. But he was like... I mean, he was like the original Tate. I mean, people like... loved or hated him and researched him and watched him. I remember watching him on Rogan. I remember like he was everywhere, and then he just they erased him, and it's insane. They got rid of his entire career, and people just laughed about it. And then also people were just like, you know what? It's just this whole like cancellation thing. It was like just a bunch of dumb college students. Well, those dumb college students grow up and they continue being themselves. Why? Because you told them this is good. And then you gave them power. And then they felt power for the first time and feeling like, okay, we can go around and ruin people's lives with dissenting opinion that is other than us. And that's more important about shutting down people's lives, because we don't care as long as we win the argument and our tribe is the best tribe in the house.
Transmission, they did massive U-turns.
I've read enough history books to know that the people who do the censoring are never the good guys, and they've been
Gavin got him canceled around the same. Yeah, and same with Anthony Cumia. Yeah, and Ann Coulter at the same time. Remember that.
Censoring a law of
power is a hell of a drug, dude. It is. Once you start to taste power, that's why Biden just announced today that he is not taking away emergency orders yet, because we're still in under COVID emergency. Once you taste the power, once you feel the power, and you feel the people's eyes, that's why cult leaders love it, you know? Get you the women.
Arguments for a very long time in the name of
cocaine's a hell of a drug.
Weaponizing virtue, and it's always in the name of tyranny. Anybody who is out here trying to silence an entire side of an argument on any subject, whether it's COVID-19.
They are weaponizing virtue. That's exactly what's happening. They're creating little disciples of people to run around and cancel other people. That's their gospel of the truth. They'll go to different YouTube platforms or different creators, and they'll search through their mentions, and they'll find out things like who cheated on who, or you sent this picture to this person, or they'll find out, you said this at this one time in your live segment, and we're going to therefore create an entire narrative of this person. That is they're spreading the good news of I found a new creator to cancel because look what they said. And it's just like this fear porn that fills your soul full of hate and anger, and you get off on it. You're just like, yeah, let's get another person. Who's next? Shut up, Papa.
Immigration, anything else. They are the evil people who are out for absolute mind control of the populace. And they should be feared.
I certainly agree that I think the healthiest thing for any democracy is for all views to be aired and debated. We seem to have lost the ability to debate. When I interviewed you...
No, you don't, Piers. You are a proponent for saying that hate speech is a thing, so shut up. My God, I hate when these people try to pretend they're for freedom of speech, and then you ask them about hate speech, and they're like, well, yeah, there's some words you shouldn't be using because you're specifically trying to hurt someone's feelings. Okay, then you're not for hate speech. Well...
Yeah, we had a few fractious moments, but actually, I thought it was a pretty spirited debate between people who perhaps... had preconceived views of each other, and I've got no problem interviewing you now about these because I think you have an interesting take on this stuff.
And that's the key to life. When you reach that level of adolescence in your mindset where you can't handle any point of view that is contrary to your own, then you're truly a broken person. And that's what the internet is purporting. It's very interesting you said about Twitter being tribal. There's a large contingent of people on Twitter who simply cannot handle reading an opinion which differs from their own. And that is a degree of immaturity that we do not need adults to be functioning with in the modern world.
No, I agree. If you were Elon Musk, this idea of charging $8 now a month, whatever it is, to access the blue tick premium Twitter account, would you do that? Would you pay the extra?
I think that social media companies for a very long time have lived in an absolute fantasy where they've printed money from thin air by charging people for pixels, and they grew into these large conglomerates with too many staff sitting around doing nothing, having coffee breaks. And Elon Musk is a businessman. He's walked into the office and he's firing a bunch of people who are messing around doing nothing, and he wants his business to make money, as it absolutely should. And how he decides that happens is his prerogative. I don't see why we should sit and accept that a website needs 200,000 people sitting around discussing in long meetings, sitting on beanbags about policy of human rights of some garbage, when he's come along and said, no, I'm a businessman. We're going to charge for our service. We're going to reduce the number of staff. And we're going to be a functional, coherent company, as they should be. And it's his prerogative to do it as he's bought the company. I think he can do whatever he wants.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree, because I remember the appalling censorship of the New York Post exclusive about Hunter Biden, the son of the president, about his laptop. This is 3 weeks before the election that Joe Biden won. He was heading, to a possible victory, but it was tight. And that story, they reckon, could have tipped it either way. But it was completely suppressed and censored, starting with Twitter, then Facebook, then others. Twitter literally locked out the New York Post account for 2 weeks for breaking a completely true story. And I thought that was shameful.
It's worse than shameful. It's worse than shameful. When you control information, you control the real world. They affect the real world in real time. They are genuinely affecting the reality people live in. They are not just a company. They're not just a social media platform. It affects absolutely every single person on the planet when it changes who is elected. I don't want to comment specifically on Hunter Biden or the laptop. I would never kill myself. But I don't think it's fair that they would hide certain key information that close to an election. And the fact that they've done that was done specifically to affect the world that we all live in.
Of course.
We all have to suffer the consequences of those things. So to sit and say that these companies can just do whatever they want, and they're private, etc. No, free speech is beyond important for democracy. It's important for the reality that we exist under.
Andrew Tate, thank you for joining me. I appreciate it.
100%. Or you need freedom of speech in order to progress as a society. The minute we start policing is the minute we start dying, and we become a third world country, because then we'll start pushing policies that make absolutely no sense and pushing for science that makes absolutely no sense. And we'll slowly cripple ourselves because power is more important than progressing. You start to eat yourself in the end. That's what